Welcome to the Worldview with Swasti. And as you know that we are doing a special series on President Putin's visit to India after a gap of 4 years. And now the joint statement has been signed and we have a list of about 16 outcomes. And many are arguing that perhaps the outcomes seem to be modest compared to the enthusiasm and the excitement that we saw in Indian media and across the strategic community as President Putin touched down in Delhi. So, how to best understand the key takeaways of this joint statement? Of course, Russia continues to be an important and historic ally at a time when the global churning is underway. And to unpack the joint statement and to discuss and to better understand the key takeaways, I have with me two experts today. Welcome, Professor Gulshan Sachdeva. He is a professor of European studies, and he has a keen eye on Russia, and especially the connectivity side of India's interest in the Russian Far East and Siberia, the Chennai Vladivostok connectivity. So he's one expert today, and the other is Yusuf Unjhawala. Yusuf is an adjunct scholar at Takshashila Institution, and Yusuf has a keen eye on everything to do with defense. So welcome, both of you. We are live today. We
Thank you,
intend
Swasti.
to yeah, welcome. So we intend to take questions from the audience, and we also intend to discuss this. But let me just start, as we are also expecting more questions, and I have a list of some questions already with me. Let me start with Professor Gulshan Sachdeva. Professor Sachdeva, let's just begin with your thoughts. We have a joint statement, of course, like I said, that everybody was looking at it. If you look at the general mood in India, it looked very upbeat, and the vibes were obviously very palpable. The warm vibes, the good vibes are very palpable. And Putin was coming after 4 years, and yet when we look at the outcomes, we see that they are rather modest, and what they indicate at best is a continuity, in my opinion. But let's hear from you. How do you look at the joint statement and its key outcomes?
Well, thank you, Dr. Swasti, for inviting me for this discussion. For me, I have followed each and every summit since 2000. And obviously, as you have rightly mentioned, if you just look at the statement, this is a routine summit. You can look at many other statements of the earlier summits as well. You will have a broader 50, 60 paragraphs on different issues and 10, 15 agreements. They'll cobble together some of those agreements. Some of them may be useful, some of them are just continuation of the many things which are already there. But to me, I think the kind of geopolitics, the kind of global changes which are taking place, the kind of situation in which Russia is, the kind of pressures on India today we have from the United States, and also disappointment from Europe. I think within that context, I think despite all changes which are unfolding all across, and the Ukraine war for the last 4 years, this visit again shows that both of them, they feel that they matter to each other. And President Putin was very confident when he came, and he was given red carpet. And not just only given red carpet welcome, Prime Minister personally went there to receive him. So they basically India, while doing that, is able to demonstrate that this is what the strategic autonomy of India is. Similarly, Russia, despite the fact that under all kind of sanctions, many countries consider him a war criminal, etc., all that stuff, but still, the way he's welcomed, the way he came here, and
Yeah.
of course, I think for India and Russia, apart from the joint statements, which are and other speeches here or there, I think they were really looking to me now. I think within the body language and the things which are coming from Russia, they are confident that they would be able to have some kind of settlement in the coming months. And once that happens, Americans would be doing business with them. There will be some easing of sanctions. And I think for India now the important point is, apart from defense and other issues, the very important pillar of old Indo-Soviet relationship was also very close trade and a very special trade and economic partnership. That pillar was badly damaged in all those years because trade got stuck about 8-10 billion for so many years. Now, interestingly, as a result of Ukraine war, when the Europeans are moving away from Russia, so we have
Right.
discounted oil. We have 70 billion trade, which can easily touch 100 billion. It continues. So how do and they have worked out a mechanism of all the payments despite sanctions, and they are cutting off from SWIFT. So how do we really sustain this? And second thing is, since our exports are very limited, so
Yeah.
can we really, in this new circumstances, can we really focus something that we can improve our exports? So that's why I think they were looking many of those issues. They're trying to fast track Eurasian economic, India Eurasian Economic Union trade agreements, investment agreements, etc. So those are the things they're trying to, I think, situate India-Russia relations in the coming months, coming years. How do we really? That's why the roadmap of 2030, and
Right.
because there's a new momentum in that economic relationship, which they were really kind of this was missing. Other things are routine, defense matters, nuclear matters. They will continue. They have been there. That's what I would look at this. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Coming to you, Yusuf, one of the readings that, of course, I had was that, especially after Operation Sindoor, if you've been seeing generally, there was a recognition that, India needs, especially the air defenses, so the S-400s, and India needs the long-range missiles for the S-400s, so the missiles for S-400s. And then we also need to urgently upgrade our Sukhoi 30s, because unless we upgrade our Sukhoi 30s, we will not be able to put the upgraded version of BrahMos on them. And for many of these, Russia remains to be a very crucial partner. I was hoping, contrary to what Professor Sachdeva just said, I was hoping that at least some, announcement or some signaling, would be seen on defense. But I was a little struck that the joint statement does not refer to defense at all. So not just about the particular deal, but simply not mentioning defense at all. And Russia has been, that's what Russia's imagination in the Indian strategic world has been, that Russia is an indispensable defense partner first and foremost. How do you look at it? Do you think that there is something that we need to read more in terms of continuity and the deals would follow later? I'm intrigued, so I thought I'll just ask you this question, and after that we'll go and because we're getting a lot of questions now from the audience. Yes, Yusuf, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Swasti, for inviting me on your show.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that we have to see is that what you see on social media, what you see in some of the podcasts and shows, are are away from the reality. And I think if you see the joint statement and also the list of outcomes, they're very tempered. They're in fact very underwhelming. But it kind of shows the state of the ties between India and Russia, which have been in a drift for a very long time. The professor just said that growing momentum in our trade. Though it's a one-sided momentum, and thanks to the war in Ukraine, and we've just got some cheap oil. So it's just a continuation of a transactional relationship which we have with Russia for a very very long time now. First was defense, and now it's energy purchase. If you look at any exports from our side, our exports to Russia is equal to what we export to Tanzania, which is about $4.8 billion last year. So the trade side is stuck. We have not been able to expand our exports into Russia. Despite this war in Ukraine and all the sanctions on Russia and all the denials of other sorts that is happening, we were not being able to, kind of make inroads into Russia, and we are still talking about a free trade agreement with them, and we're still talking about, barriers in Russia towards Indian products. There are certain things that we can do, like pharmaceuticals, food items. At the beginning of the war, they were talking about importing dairy and vegetables from all over the world, and that was an opportunity for India. But nothing of that sort has happened. Going
Why
to
do you think
defense.
this is not happening, Yusuf? No, I mean, let's just finish that because this is something that we want to understand. Of course, there is a huge economic opportunity. The trade has gone up like anything, but so has the trade deficit. And this is something that we all recognize. Why do you think India has not been able to do that? Do you think the problem is with payments? Because Professor Sachdeva said in my own reading is that, the payment mechanism is by and large working. So why is it that we are not able to export?
No, payment should not be an issue. I mean, we are holding
Hmm.
a lot of Russian money in India because we have not
Yeah.
been able to repatriate the money over here. So
Hmm.
that is in the
Hmm.
rupee accounts over here, and all the
Hmm.
exports that India would do from here
Hmm.
to Russia, the payment
Hmm.
should not be an issue. We get paid in rupees, and that also takes care of any sanction on dollar payments. Right. So
Okay.
it's just that the market access in Russia has not happened.
Hmm.
We have not been able to find new opportunities in Russia? I mean, why isn't there more imports from India from the industry, right? A manufacturing setup. I mean, yes, we face China, but there
Hmm.
has been no effort in that regard of Russia trying to expand its scope of what it imports from India. And
Hmm.
things like that, right? I mean, automobiles. I read reports about tractors. I mean, India is one of the biggest tractor manufacturers in the world, for example. Why
Okay.
haven't we seen opportunities in that regard? So it
Okay.
does this question has been around for 2 decades now. I mean,
Hmm.
just before the war in Ukraine started, our trade was at about $8 billion, which and Russia wasn't even in the top 20 of our trading partners, right? Today, if it's
Hmm.
gone to some 60-70 billion dollars, is all one way oil trade. I
Hmm.
mean, if India and Russia target of $100 billion in trade by
Hmm.
2030, it's yeah, I mean, Russia can offer some more discounts and we increase our oil purchase and then you reach $100 billion next year, right? But it's a very lopsided. It's very narrowly focused on energy. Earlier it was defense, now it's energy, and this is the kind of the bane of India-Russia ties, right? Excessive focus on a particular segment. Before it was defense, it still remains there, and now it's
Okay.
oil, and both are a source of tension with our other partners.
All right, but also, a couple of minutes from you, a couple of remarks from you on the defense part that I asked, because we are now getting flooded with questions. So keep it short because then I'll have to ask questions. Yes, go ahead, Yusuf.
So I'm not
Yeah.
surprised that any defense deal or any announcement has not happened. There are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
kite flying, I would say, a lot of media, I don't know, maybe
Mm-hmm.
propaganda, maybe influence operations, I don't know. I mean, all kinds of things were put out in the media. But there was nothing from the Indian government side. I don't think I have read any report or any indication that something was in the offing. It was all
Mm-hmm.
probably a wish list of people, and
Okay.
it only shows that yeah, a lot of things remain to be done behind the scenes. Pricing
Mm-hmm.
is a very big issue if you track all of India's defense purchases from Russia, starting from Gorshkov with a very bad experience we have had with that. And just a couple of days back, there was a report that the deal for the Akula has been finalized and India has paid some $2 billion. Just go back a couple of days earlier, the chief of Navy
Yeah.
said that it has the negotiations are in an advanced stage. There was
Hmm.
no indication that something was in the offing. So you have to read what
Okay.
the officials are saying, what the chiefs are saying in this regard.
All right. Okay. So let us, because the purpose of this live is to actually engage the audience. I can see there are a lot of questions that Yusuf raised, and I would like to come back to that. And Professor Sachdeva can also of course get in here. But first, let's just start. There is a question by DPK 579109, and his question is interesting. He's asking that in what ways might the elaborate welcome for Putin strain India's Quad partnerships and relations with Europe. So basically, it's Quad on the one hand and Europe with the other, especially after recent joint criticisms of Russia's war over Ukraine. Thanks for the question. So, Professor Sachdeva, let's begin with you. It's more geopolitical. How do you think India should be responding to these kind of questions? Yeah.
No, I don't see any contradiction here because this is what India's stated policy has been.
Mm-hmm.
That yes, we have very close partnerships with the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We also have now, for the last 10, 15 years, developed very close partnership with the EU and its member states.
Mm-hmm.
But in certain ways, we also have a very privileged partnership with Russia as well, because we
Mm-hmm.
do have certain concerns, certain interests in the Indo-Pacific region. where we feel that our partnership with our Quad partners would be very useful in the context of rising and assertive China to rebalance some of those things, because nobody
Mm-hmm.
can really, do that otherwise individually. But we
Mm-hmm.
also have very serious, very important strategic and economic interest in the continental, Eurasian mass.
Yeah.
There, your relations, what you do in Central Asia, how do you deal with Iran, how do you do things, on many of those connectivity projects, many of security concerns here. There, working with Russia is very, very useful. It will continue to be very important for us. And the Russia being within the United Nations Security Council, having very solid nuclear arsenal, and the defense linkages what we have, even the existing what the even civil nuclear whatever the program we have. Broadly, this is still Russian. I mean, others have just we've been talking for last many years. So in many areas, that has been the case, and I think this particular visit was again very clearly demonstrated the same thing that not that we in fact if you look at the prime minister's initial statement what he made,
Yeah.
it,
Mm-hmm.
it was a bilateral summit, but 80-90% of his statement was about Ukraine, about peace, about how India and how this will be useful for the world peace, etc., etc., saying that there are
Yeah.
certain concerns from the other sides, and it is also India's concern in a sense that the peace come back to there. Not,
Yeah.
but India also realized that Russia has direct communications with the United States. They continue to have that, and that's the way India welcomed whatever is happening. So I don't see
Mm-hmm.
any major problem because this is what we have been doing. We have been, and in the next presidency of India would be BRICS presidency. So again,
Mm-hmm.
working with all those countries which are members of the BRICS would be again very important for India for a successful presidency of BRICS in India. So that's
Right.
how India has been working, and that's also been clearly demonstrated by this.
Right, but Professor Sachdeva, there's also one thing that perhaps adds a bit of a nuance there. That when this is what India perhaps wanted from the beginning. You know, India, as soon as Donald Trump came, one of the reasons why we welcomed Donald Trump's return to the White House was because we were kind of convinced that Donald Trump can unilaterally sort of find a solution to the Ukraine war by having this mechanism, this dialogue mechanism, or let's say whatever understanding he has with Putin. But then Donald Trump remains to be a very precarious and a very uncertain person too. I mean, for all you know, one doesn't know. We are hoping for the best case scenario, but nobody can really read Donald Trump's mind well. I mean, if he doesn't get the result that he wants to get from all that he's investing in the Russia-Ukraine situation, he would not take long to sort of move on to something else. He has a very live, active volcanic situation going on in Venezuela. His national security strategy has clearly said that the Western Hemisphere is where he's looking at. So I hope that this continues and India is able to sort of, because to utilize this rapprochement, so to say, between United States and Russia, because that, of course, is the best case scenario for us. But and to Vivek's question, no, but to this DPK's question, I think what the point was that India multi-aligned, so you don't see anything really out of the world in terms of this multi-alignment. There's another very interesting questions by Vivek Genetics, and there are two questions by him. Yusuf, would you like to take this? One question is that. He mentions the China factor. And I think this is one factor which has been conspicuously missing. You know, we are suddenly operating as if China doesn't exist or China doesn't have any impact, or perhaps everything is hunky dory. I mean, some kind of a wishful thinking. Do you think some kind of a wishful thinking exists? Because I'll repeat his question. He says that how the world is going to take Putin's visit to India. Of course, that's pretty much covers the first part of the question that another viewer asked us. And how will it improve relations with China? And this comes because recently China stated very emphatically that Arunachal Pradesh is theirs, you know, despite the rapprochement and despite the fact that India would like to work with China, keeping aside these problems that do not have quick solutions. We are all on the same page when it comes to a tactical rapprochement with China. How do you think this Russia factor is going to, Putin having good ties with Trump going to help India's situation with China? I think the China factor is a bit of a miss in all the conversations we have had.
Oh, the China factor is very much there, and if you see our relations over the last 7-8 years, the China factor has been an influencing one in where the Russians have gone very close to China, especially after the war. Um,
Mhm.
uh, the Russians have, helped China or are helping China with the missile early warning
Mm,
systems.
mm,
Entire of India's deterrence against China is based on missiles. So it's, if you see, there is a bit of a clash where Russia is
mm,
actually helping China in kind of
mm,
blunting our deterrence
mhm,
against China. Although that's not directed against India, but that's the effect of it. So the relations between Russia and China have an impact on us,
mm,
and and if you see what happened around Galwan, they were very neutral,
mm,
and you would say that, yeah, Russia would maintain a neutral stance, but then that's not what we expect from our
mm,
oldest and the most dearest partner, so to speak.
mm,
So
mhm,
that is very much a factor, and that's the reason why India was looking at other friends to hedge its best.
mm,
That's
mhm,
why Quad came around, and Russia was
mm,
very angry about the Quad. And in 2020, I mean, they were
mm,
very open about
mhm.
India's position in the Quad, or India's
Okay.
participation in the Quad.
Okay. All right. Because there's very interesting a follow-up question on this, and either of you can take it. I think this is a bit of a lighter question that Satyam Singh Hindustan asks us. If he says that, do you think there's a possibility that China and Russia can become the Jay and Viru of Asia, basically underscoring that what about their equation and their deepening? Because that is something which doesn't really seem to go away. And I mean, if you ask me, in my own writings, what I've argued is that for India, the Ukraine war is relevant not because of what is happening in Ukraine per se, because that doesn't really cut ice in India. That's like a very far away theater. But it is about how Russia sort of deepens its engagement with China because it's cut off from Western, tech, etc. Now, Professor Sachdeva, let me just come back to you on this and ask you: do you think this reversal, because it's very natural that both India and Russia remain each other's room for maneuver, but I mean, does it sound like that on paper, or do you think in practicality there would be a problem with in terms of this reversal? Because many of these defense systems that we are talking about, they have information systems, they have chips, and substituting them overnight may not be that plausible and possible. But how do you look at it? Do you think that we need to sort of keep engaging Russia to make sure that China doesn't have the last laugh, or is China already laughing and we don't hear that so much?
No, I think, the way I think the things are happening today,
Mm-hmm.
there is so much, I mean, it's very difficult to say anything with certainty. You
Yeah.
mentioned about Donald Trump. We welcomed Donald Trump, or in the sense of we were kind of confident that we'll be able to do very good business with Donald Trump, not
Mm-hmm.
because of anything he has said about Ukraine.
Yeah.
But the way I think the Trump administration, earlier Trump administration, we were, doing pretty okay with them.
Yes.
And by
Yeah.
and large, with any Republican administration, Indian government has been very comfortable compared to the Democrats. So that
Yes.
was the broader understanding. In fact, I think that Dr. Jaishankar was somewhere mentioned, when there
Mm-hmm.
was possibility of he becoming a president, and he said,
Mm-hmm.
that many countries in the world are worried, but India is not one of them. And in
Mm.
fact, now what has happened is that India is perhaps only one of the countries, apart from Brazil, which hasn't been able to sign trade deal with them. Many others have actually already done that.
Okay.
So, and in fact, it's not just only what is happening between what may happen between Russia and US, but what may happen between President Trump and President Xi Jinping. They'll
Mm.
be meeting 3, 4 times this year. So he
Yeah.
also want kind of business relations with him as well. So many of the
Mm-hmm.
calculations, many of the things which actually India within the context
Yeah.
of Quad as Indo-Pacific we have been doing. So we might
Mm-hmm.
have to recalculate many of those things again, the way things happen, or it may not
Mm.
happen. We don't know. And
Mm.
similarly, Russians, yes, they're very closely working now with the Chinese for the last many years. And
Mm-hmm.
particularly after Ukraine war, they have absolutely no choice but to work with Russians with Chinese because that's how they have just survived. Their economy has survived. There
Mm-hmm.
many of those things have survived. They have
Yeah.
been able to sell their energy. So that,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean that they are very comfortable with that kind of situation. They would not like to be in that situation, but the circumstances are that they are, and that is why I think India becomes also important for them, because India
Okay.
may be 5 times smaller economy than China,
Hmm.
but
Okay.
still, I think that India is the only country which, in the long run, can also have the scale to catch up with many of those things which China has today. So
Right.
working with India, in fact, that's why, in fact, they already talked about, I think one of the journalists, when I think from India Today or something, asked about, Russia joining G7, G8. He said no, because in fact, the future he looks, and then he elaborated, with the global South country, which they call the global majority countries. In fact, they also want to smuggle themselves into the global South because they don't
Okay.
see much future now with the Europeans and others. So no, things are changing so fast. So we have to be very careful. Yes, but yes, then we also have our own issues with how do you really we forget about who every country how they will manage their relations with China because everybody wanted to decouple. They were not been able to do it, either Americans or Europeans. So we also thought that we'll be able to decouple. The only thing what we have at the moment is just trade relations with China. But all other kind of linkages, whether technology linkages, investment linkages, because we have been very, very cautious. So
Okay.
whether how do we really look at? Because many of our businesses are quite concerned that if you look at the ambitious modernization programs of India, look into railway modernization, look into many of other things. The cheapest technologies are available perhaps only in China at the moment compared to many of them.
Right. Right.
So,
I
the
mean, yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
of
churning,
course.
lot of things need to happen. And these are still large economies next to each other. How do you take advantage? That's what you have to do. And others are trying to do the same thing. I mean, there are challenges, there are things, but
Okay.
still you have to deal with them. That's what India also has to do the same thing.
Right. Right. That's a great way of actually answering a very
Swasti,
complex
can I just
question.
come in regarding the earlier part about
Yeah.
China as
Please,
well
please
as
go
our
ahead.
defense?
Please go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Perhaps we've not seen any of the defense, the next lot of defense deals, the S-400, Su-57 and things that people were talking about. Although I don't think India is going to buy the Su-57. Is this China factor? I mean, you have to factor in that there are sanctions on Russia. It does not have access to advanced technologies like chips and electronics and other things, and it is totally dependent on China for it. And for us, it's a strict no, no. I mean, how are you going to prevent any backdoors, any access to our systems to the Chinese? I don't think we can ignore that, and we'll have to think hard about buying any advanced Russian systems. Perhaps that's the reason why we don't have any movement on or we don't see anything on the defense sector.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of allude to that because it is true that in 2024 September, there was a circular by the Ministry of Defense that actually directed the Indian Armed Forces to cleanse their equipment of Chinese tech. Now, a lot of that is not possible because, there are so many nuts and bolts and the smaller components that actually come from China. But when it comes to sensitive information systems, right, sensitive chips, the advanced chips, that is where perhaps the red line needs to be drawn, and we will have to draw, especially that's been one of the key takeaways after Operation Sindoor as well, the subsystems integration that we see between China, Pakistan, and Turkey and the way it manifests. So, yes, that also is a point. Now, alluding to that, there's another question, an interesting one. The question is by Cactus, and Cactus asks this question saying that multi alignment is fine, but India's pressing needs have to do with capital investment and technology in the economy, neither of which Russia can provide or has provided. Are we damaging our economic future by relying too much on Russia? And Satyam Singh Hindustan has a follow-up question on that, where he says something, asks something very genuine. I think everybody wants to understand this better because does Russia actually matter in terms of global economy? Because we keep referring to Russia's economy, the size, the GDP size being about 2 trillion. Okay, whereas when you look at the advanced economies, you do see that there are heavyweights out there. So let's start. Maybe we can start with Yusuf. Your remarks first, and then we come to Professor Sachdeva. Investment, big problem. India needs investment, without which we are not going to grow as a manufacturing based economy. I mean, we tried that. The more we export to the West, the more we'll end up importing from China. That's what also shows our dependence on China. But anyway, Yusuf, how do you look at that? Okay,
I think
investment.
people have to just get over the past, right? Russia is not the Soviet Union of the last century, which was investing in India. There was great economic ties. So Russia is not. It does not have that strength. It does not have the money. It does not have the technology even. I mean, most of it's outdated. I mean, that's the reason why we even moved to the West for some of our most advanced stuff because Russia just didn't have that. So even in that regard, it's behind. As far as technology, money, capital, even people to people ties, where our migration happens, everything is all Western oriented. It's in that direction. I mean, regardless of what Trump is doing and all those policies, but the bottom line is that all our money is going to is coming from, the investments are coming from there. All our GCCs in India are all American or Western companies, and this is where our economic future lies. They are the key to our development. If we want to become a developed country by 2047, the West is going to play a huge role in it, in terms of investment, technology, capital, everything. And Russia just doesn't fit in this because they don't have anything to offer to us.
Okay, Professor Sachdeva, please give me your thoughts on this question, which is a valid question on getting investments. Of course, India is a very investment hungry infrastructure. Uh, Russia's role in this.
Well, I think broadly, I think he's right that the kind of modernization ambition India has, obviously, the kind of savings what we need from outside, the kind of technology we need, and kind of linkages we need, and we have already clearly identified that this is the United States, this is the European Union, where trade, investment, technology, and even green transition, all the targets will have to be brought. That's why all the partnership has been made. But at the same time, I would still argue that you need to have diversifications in everything. Like if you have to have 8% growth, 9% growth, then only you will be able to achieve that Viksit Bharat kind of ambition. Now that kind of growth would also need huge energy, and whatever our ambitious targets of renewables are, by 2030, and by 35, or net zero by 2070, etc. The fact of
Right.
the matter is that the fossil fuel will continue to be very, very important for India, at least till 2047, if not 2070. Now, we need to, and if you look at from the last 20, 30 years, from Planning Commission onwards, the kind of energy strategy we have been advocated in India, diversification of your resources,
Right.
diversification of your sources and the areas of your supply of energy, fossil fuel particularly. Till, I mean, 3, 4 years back, all our large part of our oil was basically coming from the Middle East, which
Yeah.
always we felt was a bit of a problem because it's a volatile region, so we do need to diversify. So they went to other some other Central Asia really didn't come up to the level where we thought it would. I mean, the countries were not able to develop. So in that sense, even if so we were not buying from Russia because this was far away. Even if our companies invested about 20 billion in, from Sakhalin one onwards, but we were just investing there and selling it, making some money rather than actually bringing physically oil here. Now, because of the kind of circumstances we have, something is happening, and even larger amount of that was also going back to Europe and US.
Yeah.
Now, since India also have large refining capacity, one of the biggest in the world, perhaps some of our companies. So they have been, so they are now using the capacities are built also to refine the Russian crude. So now from next year, Russia will not, I mean, Europeans will not buy that. So they might have to now find other markets. So similarly, even for defense diversification, yes, that again was a issue like energy diversification. When we were having 70% from Russia, everybody advocated that we need to diversify. We'll continue to diversify. We have diversified, from the US, Israel, France, etc., all other countries. But the fact of the matter is, still for the next 10, 15 years, or at least even more, some of our platforms will continue to use Russian ones. And we may continue to buy from them as well as also from the Russians as well, because maybe some of them are cheaper, some of them are more useful. And now, and I think, there's also was, I think, an issue that in the last 3, 4 years, because there might be disruptions, some
Okay.
disruptions happened, but now they have actually scaled up their production capacities. Two, three, I mean, I would say 3 units. I mean, 3 shifts are working in Russia to produce
Yeah.
weapons first for their own thing, and whenever there is a kind of a certain settlement within Ukraine, so they
Yeah.
will have much more battle tested weapons than what they
Yeah.
had. They had the
Right.
capacities, and if they are cheaper, then some of the time you will continue to buy. So yes,
Okay.
For India's broader ambitions, I think the United States, Russia, Europe would be very useful. But I would not discount that Russia will be totally useless for us, and even for mobility. I mean, in the last 3 years, we have seen, 30, 40 people, thousands of people have gone and started working in Russia. And now when there is a pressure, high skilled people may just go somewhere else, but there are also people need to go anywhere else. And Russia has plenty of scope for many of the, because many of the Central Asians have moved away. Even some of the Chinese in the neighboring areas which were working, they are not there. So they need actually a lot of manpower, and India can supply that as well. So, there are areas in which there are certain complementarities. But yes,
Yeah.
broadly, you have to depend more on the West and thing, but Russia will still continue to be a useful partner for India.
No,
Right.
on the
So
oil,
there is an
on the oil,
yeah.
there is actually there's concentration rather than diversification. In the last 3 years, we have put all eggs in Russian basket. We have turned away from our traditional sources of supply, which was a leverage for us. We were also expanding to buying from Nigeria and such sources, right? And all that has been cut, and that has other impact, right? Because we were expanding our ties with West Asia, and some of those countries will probably be agreed that we have cut their oil purchase. We have to look
No,
at
I
that
no, I
aspect
no,
as
I
well.
don't agree with this because see, the major source of oil which we have stopped was Iran, again under U.S. pressure because otherwise Iran was the best oil we were getting, very close to the Indian shores, cheapest transportation, but because of the U.S. pressure, simply we just stopped that.
But it was
And
still not the
China,
largest source of oil.
sorry.
Iraq was always the largest source of oil for India.
Iraq was source, but Iran also 15-16% oil we were buying actually from Iran at one just few years back. So that we stopped, and many other sources. And in fact, the oil which is coming from Russia, as I was mentioning, this is not coming to India. 70-80% actually just being exported, not really coming to India. So Indian consumer did not get actually the huge amount of and even the prices of price. Only thing broadly, yes, because India was buying this oil from Russia, and this was also very useful for the Europe and the US as well. In fact, the US gave approval to Indian buying oil earlier from Russia
Yes,
because
that's
that will
yeah.
stabilize
Yeah.
energy markets, and this was also
That
very useful for Europe as well because the kind of inflation they were facing for 2-3 years. In fact, there was I mean they were able to, so Indian, I mean, buying oil from Russia somehow stabilized, but it did not really come to broaden that Indian energy security per se. So what I'm saying is that it may not be 40% what we were, the numbers were there a few months back, but still, since certain system has been built, mechanism have been built, so we may be buying 10, 15, 20% oil from Russia from the years to
there's
come. That should not be a
yeah.
bad thing for India.
Yeah, there's also another factor here, I mean, in my opinion, which is usually not discussed, and especially this is about the energy purchases. So what we are referring to is that, the amount of oil that we were buying from Russia, we have to reduce because of US pressure and sanctions now. And now, if you know that we are also, although not buying from the sanctioned entities, which means Luka Oil and Rosneft, but we are buying from non-designated entities. Okay, so in many ways, you can say that the flow of Russian oil to India sort of continues. Well, okay, despite whatever the changes. Now, there's another factor that we need to look into, which is that because then these non-designated entities come with their own middlemen and will come with their own shadow tankers and fleets, then the amount of money that India is then spending on these middlemen also is a cost that India is incurring. But again, you will need to sort of settle down in terms of how it plays out. I mean, all these changes need to be accounted for. I think in a broader way, because in the shorter run, we really don't really have any metric or data to really argue as to what is India's expense in terms of catering to these middlemen, because there is an entire ecosystem around the shadow oil purchases and shadow oil exports anyway. But since this is also about the
No, but those companies which are
audiences.
actually
Yeah.
just Swasti, but the
Yeah.
companies which are buying and
Hmm.
refining this oil, they are doing it because they see certain profits in this. And if
No,
they
no,
do
of
not
course,
see any profit, obviously they will not buy it. I mean, then obviously the numbers will go down.
no, it's sir, it's not just about profit. The thing is that if you the point is that we are not able to retrieve that data. So for example, what exactly is that profit, and from that profit, how much exactly is India is able to save? But By definition, this is a bit of a murky situation because of so many sanctions and shadow freeze, and we will have to sort of wait for some kind of a projection to come out. Was what I'm trying to say. And then there is a question. It's an interesting question, Yusuf. You might like to take it. One, which is that how is Putin able to take out all the time to make international visits despite despite the war? So basically, this question by Vivek Genetics is that there is a live war going on for 4 years, and how is he able to make time for these visits? So that's one. Let's try to answer this question. And the second question I think is more direct, which is that why DPK 579109 asks that why do you think India won't commit to Sukhoi 57 despite Russia's lucrative offers, so to say? And this is something that we have all have alluded to, that initially India did walk out of the Sukhoi 57 program after seeing and did not like what it saw. It had its own preferences, but this time around, when Russia is offering us full TOT, etc., why do you think that is not happening? And he's referring to your point that since you said it's not happening, do you think it is because of concerns over stealth flaws, or do you think this is because we want to prioritize AMCA, or do you think this is happening because of US pressure? So first about how does Putin get the time, and then second about Sukhois.
He's not leading the charge in the field. He's not the general, so he has a time. I mean, look at Zelensky; he's all over the place, and he's under severe pressure, right? So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think the time is a factor. Uh,
yeah.
Putin has traveled to North Korea, has gone to even to China, so I
China.
don't think time is a factor.
He has gone to
Yeah,
United
but
States.
very most recently to the United States,
Alaska. He went to Alaska.
and he was personally received by Trump with red carpet. So I mean, those who
Yeah.
are saying that why India did that, well, you have to look
Yeah.
at what Trump did. But going to the
Yeah.
Sukhoi 57, I think it would be a very bad deal for us.
Mm.
I don't think we should buy it. I have written about it. I wrote an op-ed very recently also about it. Multiple
Mhm.
factors. First of all, like
Mhm.
you said, the IF had rejected it. We were part of the FGFA program at that time, and then
Yeah.
we also had
Mm.
money sunk in $290 million back then. But it was not
Mm.
to our liking in terms of its capability, in terms of the work share. That is one.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
the Russians themselves don't have large numbers of these jets, and they
Okay.
have not deployed it against Ukraine. They failed to establish air superiority. If it was a great fifth generation fighter, then he should have managed to establish air superiority in Ukraine, and that would have changed how the war was fought. Probably maybe Russia would have won the war, but that didn't
Mhm.
happen. Another point is, like I alluded to earlier, is Chinese electronics now. What kind of electronics would be there in Chinese electronics within in the Sukhoi 57? Right, that is
Mhm.
one factor. And for me, most important factor is if we buy this, it's going to again impact our own
Kill our
program, the
AMCA program. Yeah.
AMCA. And
Mm.
people say, what about the timelines? I mean, the Russians have not delivered the S-400s nearly what 8 years since 2009 2019. So it's already six
2018.
7. 2019 October is when we signed the deal. 2026 sometime end of 2026 is when they're going to deliver the last two. So look at the
Mhm.
time that they are taking to deliver defense equipment to us.
But
And
Yusuf,
Su-57.
But Yusuf, one sec, I'll just stop you there because see, usually the rebuttal to this, let's say deliveries and timelines, right, also is because of the fact that Russia is in a live war. Let's say there
It
are,
does not
let,
concern us, Swasti. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
for us, our
one sec.
security matters, so
I
we
mean,
have to take that into account that they are
yeah,
not
yeah,
going to be able to deliver these weapons on time. We need it. If see, look, what we heard was, and all these was probably kite for flying, is that we require some 2 to 5 7, no, 5 squadrons as a stopgap. 5 squadron as stopgap. It's not a stopgap. It's going to impact. That's a full spread fleet. It's not a stopgap. It's going to impact us. Money will go out and impact our AMCA program. And what
yeah.
about the sanctions which will come from other countries?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally get your point and I take it. But what I wanted, you to also sort of highlight a little bit better, because see, usually when you say that Russia is not able to deliver, the, let's say the S-400s, and there's been a delay and we don't know when they're coming, even though the timelines have constantly been pushed, etc. But on the other hand, there are also GE deliveries that are delayed, right? The engine deliveries, which has been crucial for our Tejas program. So, I mean, both these things are having a bearing and an impact on India's operational readiness. I mean, what would you have to say about that? Is it fair to sort of, single out Russia for the deliveries when you also have deliveries, maybe for other reasons. But these are the usual, I mean, a kind of a more 360-degree view that we need to take. What do you think?
No, no. Look, I don't think the delay by GE for delivery of
Mm-hmm.
the F404 engine is comparable to what Russia's delivery problems are. Right?
Okay.
The F404 line was shut down in 2016. We did not give them more orders. They waited for us, and then they shut the production line. They revived it in 2021 around the COVID time. A lot of the suppliers had vanished by then. They had to stitch all that together, and there was a bit
Mm-hmm.
of a delay. And now the
Okay.
engines are coming, but the jets are not flying because there were delays in the HL for some of the integrations on our side. So there was a
Mm-hmm.
kind of a very convenient excuse that the engines are not coming, and that's the reason why the program has been delayed. But that was
Okay.
not the case. But you have to look at
Okay.
this way: the S-400 deal was signed in peacetime, right? In 2019, it was three
Mm-hmm.
years that Russia had to deliver those weapons to us. Originally, it was intended to be delivered by 2023. It did not happen, all right, and
Mm-hmm.
now it is wartime, and Russia is
Okay.
going to prioritize its
Mm-hmm.
own requirements because of all the attrition that has happened, and also
Right.
it's going to be impacted by all the sanctions. So there is a slowdown over there as well. So qualitatively, it is very different of
Okay.
what's happening with the GE deliveries and what Russia can do.
Versus, yeah,
GE
yeah.
deliveries have already started. Well, Russia
Mm.
one, we are still waiting.
Yeah. All right. No, no, that's a fair point. And I mean, I asked you to sort of elaborate a bit on it because I think sometimes there also is a bit of a confusion in, usually when people ask you questions because they equate the two. Anyway, there's a very interesting question, and that should go to Professor Sachdeva. And this is asked by Rohit Singh. Rohit Singh asked this question that does this visit send a clear message about India's position on the Russia-Ukraine war? And there's a follow-up question, which is probably a great question because my op-ed is on it. What real impact will the reloss agreement, the reciprocal exchange of logistics, this agreement is going to have for India and for Russia? Professor Sachdeva.
Well, I think the Relos, since you've written an article, maybe you can answer better.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
I mean, on this clear message, well, I mean, I think India's position on the Ukraine war has been quite clear now for the last 4 years. One is that, both countries are not just only Ukraine, not just only Russia, but Ukraine is also a very friendly country.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, um, if you look at by the principle, of course, the violation of territorial integrity and sovereignty of any country is a very serious issue. So India has concerns about this, but India has not really, kind of voted in that sense. If you can look at India's record in all the UN. Votes which have taken place in one way or the another on all these issues, because somehow the closeness with Russia and the broader concern in which India would like, and in fact some of those negotiations which are taking place, again going in somehow in those directions. So India, of course, I mean, the way I think that even the Prime Minister mentioned today itself that India is basically would like to see this whole thing settled as soon as possible, in the
Right.
satisfaction of both the parties concerned. That's what they would like to see. But since India cannot really, I mean, of course, many people would like India to influence Russia, etc., etc. Now that won't happen because, yes, you can talk to them, but Russia has its own way of doing things, and they have, if they want to talk, they will talk directly to the Americans. This is what they are doing. Even the Europeans could not really do much. They have been also, so far, has been sidelined totally. So it concerns you. It creates a lot of uncertainty, not just only about the Ukraine per se, but the way I think India's own relations now with Europe and also with the United States, particularly now in the last few months, are being affected by what is happening in Ukraine. So you have
Yeah.
to see that how these things really, and this is what actually I think India would like to see. I mean, not that something. Position is like this, that I mean, it's a very easy thing to say that we are for the peace, etc., rather than taking very hawkish position this way or that. But that's how I think, because you are not really directly there, you are not directly affected in that sense. Everybody else is also affected, so you can just kind of say this broad position. That's what India has taken, and that's the
Right.
position. In fact, most countries in the global south has done the same thing.
Right, right. Well, that's right. I mean, one of the things that I think everybody understood in the last many years is that, if you say that the collective West under Biden administration, then and then only Europe wanted to completely isolate Russia, and that isolation has not happened. There's absolutely no two ways about it. There may be differences in how different countries of the global South view this particular situation, but yeah, the isolation has certainly not happened. As far
No,
as the reload
and I
is
think
concerned,
yeah, sorry, another thing also, India believed that unlike the West, which I mean clearly cited their objective as strategic defeat of Russia. I don't think India believes in that, because India feel that in any kind of new world in which you want a multipolarity, and strong Russia is, India feel, is a useful thing to have rather than actually a weak
right,
Russia, because then you'll
right.
have better, more room for maneuvering. Sorry, I mean, yeah, go
Correct.
ahead.
Yeah, there is something very interesting that Dr. Viktor Mizin told me, who's a Russian Russian bureau, diplomat and widely respected scholar, and I was just speaking to him for another for the previous episode of the World View with Swasti, and he said something very important, and he said that actually in the Russian strategic elite now there is a lot of thinking and discussion on the role of China, because they are also having this impression that perhaps China doesn't want this war to end, because it really suits China's interests to keep Russia the junior partner and get a seamless supply of extremely discounted and in very opaque manners at that gas and oil, because in India it's still just oil. In Russia, in China's case, it's both oil and gas. So even the Russian strategic elite is sort of worried about what role could China be playing, because from India's perspective, of course, we would want the war to end and Russia basically business as usual to get there. But China could be a bit of a spoiler there. Now we have a few more questions, and but we have to answer them briefly because we are also getting to the end
Can
of
you talk
our.
about the reloss, Swasti? I think
Yeah,
it's a very
yeah, yeah,
important one,
sure. Yeah,
because
yeah,
I read a report
yeah.
which we talked about basing
Hmm.
3,000 troops for over 5 years. I don't think that was an accurate
No, no, that's not
interpretation. I
accurate.
don't think so,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that was very concerning. I don't think there is any agreement signed. We don't have a
yeah.
draft yet, so that was probably an inaccurate reporting. But what kind of impact it can have on India? Look, we have a logistic agreement with some of our Western partners. We have with Japan, Australia as well.
With
I
the
don't know.
US,
US was
yeah,
obviously the US was the first one. We have
yeah,
with the French and the Singapore as well.
yeah.
Along with that, we have ship repair agreement with the United States. And if there, I can't imagine Russian and U.S. warship being side by side and their personnel around, and that could probably take an impact. That imagine if you have a Russian warship, on in an Indian facility, it's going to be an economic cost towards repairing an American ship, because that's probably we're going to learn a lot from those guys. I don't know how that is going to play out, so we'll have
Well,
to think on those lines.
yeah. So actually, I mean, just to cut a long story short and to basically explain in a rather simple manner, I mean, of course, this is a logistics exchange and support agreement, and India has been signing these agreements. In fact, it is quite surprising that the fact, and this is to the question to Rohit, that India, despite the long-standing, friendly relationship with Russia, actually it was the US with whom we first signed, the Lemoa, and which was followed by Comcasa and then Pekka and all that. Now, very quickly, from India's perspective, it is helpful because we are looking at deepening our engagement in the Arctic. We are looking at deepening, our investments in the Russian Far East and Siberia, especially Chennai, Vladivostok. There are also plans, and this particular thing was actually mentioned by the Director General for the Project Office of Arctic from Russia. He was also on the Worldview with Swasti, a couple of episodes ago, and he mentioned that there are plans to sort of include more regional actors. For example, let's say Vietnam or Indonesia, and from Indian side getting more ports. So there seems to be a push from the Indian, let's say, Indian Ocean region in Chennai to all the way to the Arctic, and something like a logistics support agreement or logistics exchange agreement sort of fills in that little capability gap, that it makes sense for Indian Navy then to have these access, to different ports along that way. Now, having said that, it is not the same as saying that Russia is going to, permanently base its troops on Indian soil or on Indian facilities or vice versa. I think these are contingent upon a particular joint exercise or a particular humanitarian relief mission, etc., etc. And finally, let's remember that the full text of the RELOS is not yet out. So I think once it's out, there will be more details that will meet the eye. And now we have to go very quickly because there are a couple of questions again and interesting ones at that. Okay, one question is asked by Spread Only Love, and the question has already been answered actually earlier into the discussion about why India is not able to export more to Russia and what stops us, and why are we not able to leverage our friendship to sort of balance the trade, and that continues to be a challenge. There's another question by Silent Minority. How much of this visit was to give the two leaders an image fill up, which at the moment they both badly need? Now, this is a bit of a hitting question. Professor Sachdeva, would you like to come in and say that do you think this was kind of a PR exercise for both sides? I mean, not that it hurts, of course, a good PR is a good PR, but what do you think? Do you think it's
No, I
anything to do
mean,
with this? Hmm, hmm,
no, I don't think Prime Minister Modi need anything, but for President Putin,
hmm,
I think it was useful because
hmm,
he has gone to, of course, many other countries, North Korea, China, Vietnam, etc. But still coming to a democratic country. And of course, he also went to the US recently, but that was in a very different context. But
hmm.
here, here we are. So he's able to kind of, put that image that he is still welcomed
Okay.
in a big democratic country, which is also not really the so-called kind of authoritarian regime, etc. But this is also a country which also has very close relations with the West as well. So I think in the overall, in for his image, it might be useful. But for India, it's a useful thing to kind of assert your own strategic autonomy, etc. That you continue to work, and then, in fact, when Prime Minister Modi he asked, I mean, if I'm forgetting, I mean he mentioned that he's a visionary leader, and
Okay.
he gave him Gita. So I don't know what exactly one has to read, but because there are many meanings actually, from Gita. I mean, either you, so there are different ways one can interpret the whole thing from the Indian perspective. But India, I
Right.
think, clearly showed that it's not under any kind of influence by anybody, because if India believes in its own right that this relationship is useful, working with Russia is important for India, and that's what India did. That is what India has done. Um, in a sense, it's for India's image in that sense, because we are not just saying about kind of foreign policy we pursue, we are also trying to demonstrate that. That's what perhaps it would show rather than
Right.
personal. Just a minute, if we can just come back to the earlier question about the exports. Why we have not been able to kind of increase our exports to Russia, and that's a crucial question actually. And about the deficit thing. The one thing is that the full deficit, it will be very difficult if you continue to buy oil from Russia. Now, that kind of money. It will be always very difficult to have the similar kind of exports, because that can happen with other countries as well. So that's so. But still, I mean, I think there is a huge opportunity, because for Indian companies to really look at Russian market. And if there are certain problems, there could be problems of tariffs, there could be problems of non-tariff, there could be problems of regulatory issues, etc. So those are the things which can be, to some extent, the governments can facilitate.
Okay.
Interestingly, in fact, when I said, the very first summit which took place in 2000, and that exactly the same time, actually, I had written that India and Russia should have a free trade agreement. We are 25 years down the line, still we are
Okay.
talking about something of that. So that's the kind of space, I mean, scale in which actually, the pace at which actually we work. So one should
Right.
not really expect many things to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
But at least now they're talking about fast tracking, that at least
Okay.
from 5 billion something, at least we can have 10-15 billion trade or something in the next 2 years. That's still doable, that's possible. And I think the mobility agreement I would still consider a very useful
Right.
agreement, which can be very, I mean, for it can be useful in many ways actually in the long run.
Right. Right. All right. All valid points there. Yusuf, what would you have to say about the image fill up observation that one of the commentators, one of our viewers has made. And there's
Uh,
just one more question, because we are trying to take as many as possible, and there's been a flood of these questions. But what about the the rupee, the Indian rupee stuck in Russian accounts? There's also one thing that somebody has just asked. It's a very sensible thing. So your very quick answers to these, and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
that money, a lot of that was in India, right? It's with State Bank of India.
Yeah.
I think we have to see on
In
that. So
Russian
probably
accounts, the
that's
Vostro and
uh,
Nostro
yeah,
accounts. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
yeah,
what he's
yeah.
referring to.
And I think that I know I read a report that Indian exporters are actually facing issues getting payments from that. I think we need to just check on that. But that's a report I read. Probably the
Okay.
professor might be able to expand on that one. But that's something I read, that there was an issue. But going back to your question on the whole PR exercise, I think this is what has happened with the India-Russia ties. This is what happened last year.
Mm-hmm.
With all this, the optics. Last year, Putin was driving Modi around in a car, or in a golf truck, in a golf cart, and yesterday we had the Prime Minister driving Putin in his vehicle towards to 7 LKM for dinner, and it all becomes about the optics, and probably it kind of masks the 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 lack of substance in the relationship.
Okay.
And that is how I see it. I mean, and if you see the outcomes, it kind of gives away that.
All right. So, some truth to that may be that, high on optics, but not so much on substance right away. But at the same time, one cannot deny that this is one of the relationships which has been extraordinarily consistent and stable, and very important in India's strategic calculus. And it depends on how New Delhi now takes this forward, keeping in mind all the other important, players and partners that we have. But thank you. On that note, I have to thank the two of you for taking the time out and joining in for this very interesting live. And I think we got a very good feedback on this. So maybe we can do some more lives later. But this was Worldview with Swasti on discussing key takeaways of the joint statement between India and Russia, as President Putin has been in India for the last 2 days. Thank you so much, Professor Gulshan Sachdeva and Yusuf Unjhawala. It was a pleasure to speak to both of you.
Thanks, Shashi.
Thank you, Swati. It was a pleasure. Thank you.